Turn off your lights. Make sure your doors and windows are locked. Things are about to get spooky. Someone is Watching Me by Brilliant Bex 1992. So I've never posted on the sub, though I have other stories I've buried deep until recently, but this is happening in the present. I've had people stalk and follow me before, and because of that and my true crime addiction, I've become supremely paranoid and a solid curtain twitcher. I, 31 female, reside in an upstairs room that was my first room to myself as a child. I had to leave a bad situation and therefore ended up back at my childhood home. For reference, when our house was built, we were told that the field to our left, with horses and a barn at the time, would one day soon be a development. That was 2000 when we were told that, and it wasn't until 2022 that the roads started being formed and a foundations laid. I had already had someone follow me home before when I was young, posted about it, but I don't know how to link it. But I was in a different bedroom next door. My parents put in a free library that was right below my window, and nighttime security lights that are very bright and turn on if you're within 20 feet of the side of my house my room is on. I'll admit, having an open field next to me so long made me accustomed to not closing my curtains when I change, because there was never anyone to watch. Now there is. For the past 2 weeks, the burglar lights next to the free library have been going off late at night. Because my one side of the curtain is open so I can use my vape, that's the only reason I noticed it at all. I don't think too much of it at first. We lock all the doors and windows every night, and I'm on the second floor. I also always look out to see if it was a car, someone walking their dog, or a deer, only to see nothing. To add, they put in a shit ton of streetlights around this area, so visibility is great. But it just kept happening. So last night I did my usual. I saw the lights come on out of my peripherals. I acted natural, giving full view out the window. I was going to bed. It was about 3 a.m., turned the TV off, closed the window and curtains, turned the lights out. Then I ducked down, peering through the curtain to the sidewalk below. I honestly thought I was going to pass out when after a few minutes, maybe 5, someone comes out from the side of my house, all silhouette dressed in black. They kept their back to me until the light turned off, but I swear I could still see them standing there, looking up like they could see me. I called the police, but while I was on the phone with the operator, I saw him run off. There wasn't much they could do, except say that they have a car drive around and look. My parents are asleep, and I know I have to tell them tomorrow. This scares the crap out of me. If it hadn't been happening for weeks and was a sole incident, I would probably be fine about it. But the fact that that light has been going off without me seeing activity and what happened tonight makes me think this person's been watching me and watching my house. The person outside my window, let's please never fucking meet. Small update. I did tell my parents, and at first they brushed me off, claiming I had a couple drinks and it was late, so I probably just saw someone checking out the library. I then had another conversation about this with my dad, who said that there had been reports the last couple of weeks of car break-ins, and since my car is parked on my side of the street right outside my window, maybe they were trying to break into it. I pointed out that if he was trying to get into my car, why was he pressed up against the house where he wasn't visible from my window? And why did he at no point go towards my car? I think I freaked him out enough that we are going to potentially get a camera for that area. Given all the development happening around us, I think it's smart even without this incident. Thank you all for your advice and replies. I'll update here again if anything happens. And there is no other updates. I hope you picked a movie that's actually scary this time. My brother scoffs while taking a swig of his beer. Don't worry, this one will definitely get a reaction out of you, I replied before putting on the recording of his girlfriend being kidnapped. What Was Unseen by Pumpkin Man 35. My family has always been big on Halloween. Our homes are decorated, we walked the streets when we were kids, and host costume parties now that we're older. I've got lots of good memories of the nights with my 2 older brothers, mother, and friends. But there's one particular story that we still frequently relate on Halloween via family group message nowadays that was not pleasant as others. A downright chilling experience that has forever embedded itself in our collective reflections. October 31st, 1991. I had turned 2 in June and was already in my own bedroom, which was the designated nursery beforehand. We lived in a suburb of Houston, Texas that is today a curved row of houses, but back then was a densely forested area. There was a large window in my room that looked across to the backyard and into the woods beyond. On this particular Halloween, the moon was in a waning crescent shape and projected just enough light to see by. I had a big plastic cutout jack-o'-lantern hanging by a thumbtack on my wall. Thin traces of splintered moonlight draped onto its big grinning face. An eerie setting indeed for what is still my favorite night of the year. My mom, brothers, and I were all worn out after a lengthy candy excursion that went well after our usual bedtime. My 2 siblings had their own rooms, and my parents were watching Night of the Living Dead in the living room. I laid beneath the covers, taking in the sounds of the swirling ceiling fan overhead. My drifting eyes looked towards my window. That's when I heard it. A faint scratching, like pawing of a kitten on glass doors. Only, we didn't have a kitten, and there certainly wasn't a glass door in my room. I stirred fully back awake, wondering what that sound was. I listened carefully to the gentleness of the silence, the swirling of the ceiling fan, Barbara's scream from the living room television. A symphony of horns burst to life as she was chased to her car by a horde of undead. Then it came again, a scratching sound like fingernails at the base of my window now. I looked towards the window. Nothing there. Slithers of Halloween moonlight pressing through the treetops and rustling into my bedroom. It came again, from something wholly unseen. A ghost? A murderer? This thing my brothers told me about called the boogeyman? Some other creature from the deep recesses of the forest? Scratching, trying to break in, trying to eat me, murder me, or zap me to a planet unknown. Scratch. The invisible fingers of something that could only be lurking on the other side of my window. Finally, I couldn't restrain myself any longer. I screamed like a 2.5-year-old has never screamed like before. My mother came charging into my room, bursting the door open like a firefighter. I cried out to her that there was something at my window and it was trying to get in. She heard the scratching sound too. Alarmed, she turned on the light and raced to the window. Nothing. No ghosts, no murderers, no boogeyman. Not even a lizard or moth, not even a tree limb, but still scratched and scratched. My mom called for my dad, and by this time, my brothers were rushing into our room too with pop guns in their hands. My dad stepped inside, hearing the scratching sounds as well. He went to the window beside my mom, but turned about when he too saw nothing outside. Yet again, scratch, scratch, scratch. Finally, we saw what it was. Scraping the wall just above my bed, just above my head, the plastic cutout of the grinning jack-o'-lantern. It moved in the wind my ceiling fan, the thumbtack having loosened its grip somehow. My dad took it down and the scratching suddenly ceased. What a fright it was, though, on that Halloween night. My brothers still enjoy poking fun at me about it, although none of us are below the age of 30 anymore. "Is it a girl or a boy, my dear?" asked a lady whose hair I had just styled. "I'm having a baby boy," I answered excitedly with my back turned, placing my comb back in my hairstyling kit, while forgetting that I was a mortuary cosmetologist. Creepy Woman in Empty Business Park by Blondie Cake 7. Many years ago, when my daughter was potty trained, a friend recommended I keep a travel potty with me. It saved me from rushing to find a restroom and avoid stopping in anywhere questionable with a toddler. We would drive about 40 minutes to pick up my husband on his lunch break. That afternoon, we'd head back to drop him off at work, and we're only about a block from the restaurant when my daughter said she had to go. The area we would just head into was a large business park and are a lot of very large buildings to the left and right. I saw one and the parking lot looked empty. I pulled over to the side of the building and parked at the curb. I had 2 car seats taking out the back seat and my husband in the passenger seat, so I took my daughter out of the car and set her up in the trunk so she could use the potty. I had just got her settled, and she was looking uncomfortable and covering her face and looking down. I looked behind me, and I see a woman walking up to me. It was summer at the time and very warm. She was wearing a jean skirt and a tank top and had a crossbody purse. She looked at my daughter and said, "Don't be embarrassed, we all go through it," and laughed. She said she needed a ride to the freeway and asked if I could take her. I told her that I was sorry, but I couldn't. She started to seem bothered and asked why I couldn't take her. I said my back seat is full, so I don't have room for her. She snapped back, "So you're telling me you put your daughter in the front seat?" I told her, no, that was my husband was in the front seat. As soon as she heard that I wasn't alone and had my husband with me, she started slowly backing away and walking down the street she came from. As she was walking away, she said, "Oh, I'm sorry. I used to be from here, but not anymore," and quickly walked off. If she would have made a left on the cross street she was walking towards when going towards my car, there was a restaurant and gas stations a block up. Plenty of people to ask for a ride. I'm still so grateful my husband was with me that day. I don't know what her true intentions were, but getting to a populated area didn't seem to be one of them. When the angels ascended from on high, they told us that we were mistaken. God didn't make us in His image. As they pulled out their knives, they informed us that He made us from His recipe book. The Family's Haunted Barn by Anonymoose. Hello, never posted here before, but I thought it would be fun to tell some spooky stories for the Halloween season. So, for some background, The barn has been my family for 2 generations. My grandparents and now my uncle. Someone did unalive themselves by hanging in the barn before they lived there. Female screams have been heard near the barn. I do not have many spooky stories. They are mostly my dad's as he grew up there. Plausible explanations at the bottom. One day, my dad was messing around with a football in the barn. He threw it into the loft only for it to come back to him in a perfect spiral. He threw the ball while yelling up to whoever was up there. No one answered, but the ball came back. He kept playing catch for around a minute until the ball didn't come back. He climbed the ladder and only saw hay. My dad was playing cops and robbers in the barn with his friends, and they decided that the gutter was for the people who got caught. The gutter was a slightly lower part on the inside of the barn for manure. My dad was caught and was standing in the gutters when he saw a red light seeping up from the grates. He and his friends panicked and ran out. My dad was part of the tough crowd in high school. Halloween was coming up and they weren't scared of ghosts. They pulled together and brought a Ouija board. Of course, the barn was a perfect place to go. Someone had died there after all. They placed their hands on the planchette and watched in fear as it started to move. They freaked out, jumped away from the board, leaving it there as they raced back to the house. One friend swore the ghost had followed him home. The teen refused to sleep alone for weeks after. He slept between his parents. When he was 17, my dad was getting ready to move out and join the army. He had to get rid of his motorcycle as he didn't have a place to store it. He had found a buyer and was showing him the bike. It was kept in a small underground offshoot of the barn. As they were talking over, the old half-broken radio suddenly started blaring organ music. My dad was a rock lover, and he had never listened to anything else. The 2 guys were spooked and ran out as fast as they could. My dad checked out the radio the next day and saw the switch was in the off position, still covered in dust. From the way the story is told, it seems like the radio could have also had a cassette player and he only listened to his tapes, which is why the organ music freaked him out so much. This is the only story that actually freaked him out, and it's just because of the music. When I was little, my uncle had put up a rope in the middle of the barn, tying it to a rafter. All of us cousins had been born pretty close together, so leaping from a hayloft like Tarzan seemed to be a good way to keep all of us kids occupied. I ran into the barn being everyone else. I grabbed the rope and clung to it with my hands and feet to cement my first place. Suddenly, small black things fell from above us. A few fell onto my head. After a moment of shock, we looked around us and saw dead bats. They littered the floor around us. Answers. For the first story, I don't know. Weird bouncing against the hay? Story number 2 about the weird glow. Probably some bacteria in a previously rainy day. Story number 3 about the Ouija board. Someone was playing pranks and one of the teens was a wuss. Number 4 about the radio. The radio was broken. It was probably also Mr. Crowley. I believe that's a rock song with organ music in it. Number 5 about the rope. Bats nest on the rope, pulled at it, probably loosened it, causing all the baby bats to fall and die. The nest just probably got stuck before it came down too. Answers for the women's screams have gotta be cougars. And these stories, well, they added in the comments, so let me keep going. I love to pretend like the barn was haunted. My dad also doesn't believe in ghosts. We had fun coming up with reasonable explanations for scary stories. Well, reasonable to us. Everyone has spooky stories though. Extra unrelated supernatural stories just for fun. My mom is an avid believer of aliens. She has seen a few drones zip away at speeds greater than should be possible. I suspect the military is doing things. One strange time, though, she was in a plane with my sister. My sister has aphantasia, meaning she can't picture images in her mind. She is also, unrelatedly, extremely uncreative and no nonsense. In the plane window, they saw a strange metal structure, almost like a power plant in the sky. Now, planes tend to fly above 20,000 feet above ground. So what was this strange structure? Asking my mom, and she says aliens. Ask my sister, and she just shrugs. My only explanation is that the clouds and light messed with their eyes, or they were closer to the ground than they thought. When I was 13, I was in this hotel. During my stay there, in every reflection, I saw bloody limbs. The mirror, the windows, the doorknob, the dresser handles, the paintings. They felt kind and like one being. There were so many of them, and they wanted me to join them. I wanted to join them, but I couldn't figure out a way to rip my limbs off and die. I was probably just hallucinating. I'd see things that didn't exist like 3 times before, so I'm pretty sure I was just hallucinating sometimes, but those times aren't as interesting or spooky. I used to cross-country ski with my dad a lot in high school. One early day, it was snowing. We were the first ones on the trail. We were so excited to be the first ones to make tracks. We skied far out there. We usually would ski for up to 4 hours on weekends. We liked a distant race. About 2/3 through the route, we noticed the strange tracks. We knew they had just been made as the snow was fresh. The tracks looked almost like a deer, but bigger and with claws. The path torted along the ski trail for a bit before jumping back into the woods. Had we spooked it? I don't know. We couldn't figure out what had made the tracks, so I took a horrid photo. Phone cameras weren't as good, and my phone was old. And showed it to my teacher, who knew animals in the area. He thought it was a fake. I knew it couldn't be, as we were the only ones out there. I think I've actually got a post about it. Well, I still don't know what it was. It could have been an animal far from home. Once when I was, I believe, 15 or 16, I had a strange and very long dream. This dream lasted years. It dropped out of high school, married my high school sweetheart. We had a beautiful child and a girl and a boy. Something happened and she died. It's been a while since I had this dream, and dreams fade quickly, but I believe she died during our son's birth. I had no education and worked construction. It was tough being a single parent to my kids, but I loved them so much. My daughter was as brilliant as her mother. She got all A's, and I knew she would be in college. I saved up what I could for them. I could tell there was something wrong with me, though. My body wasn't working like it should. I came from a family of farmers and hunters and mechanics. We were built strong. I wasn't as strong as I used to be. I put off doctor's visits, though. I was a man, and men don't need help. One day I slipped on a ladder and took a nasty fall. I had to go to the doctor. When I was there, they realized something was off. They ran some tests and came back to me, explaining that my muscles were atrophied. I had some sort of disease and I wouldn't be able to work construction anymore. I watched my body wither away in front of me. My daughter, bound for greatness, took a gap year after high school to care for me and her little brother. My bills were stacking up. I couldn't work. I was bringing my family down. I was the man. I was supposed to be the provider. Their college savings were wasted on me. I was going to die anyways. Every hunter has a gun. I woke up with a grim determination. I knew I had to make the right choice. Well, some may think I was trapped in another world. I just think I was another weird dream, albeit a bit of a long one. This is getting long, so this is the last one. I went to Machu Picchu. We hiked up to a taller point for photos, but didn't enter the area yet. The next day, we entered, and I vomited all over the sacred land. The tour guide freaked out about it a bit. He also decided I had been sacrificed there. The first thing I remember watching as a child was a Machu Picchu doc, and ever since then I've been obsessed. I know so many facts about it and always wanted to go. It just so happened that they were able to visit on the winter solstice, an extremely important day for Incan people. There is a special area the light shines through on only the winter and summer solstice, and my birthday. As soon as we exited the sacred grounds, my vomiting stopped and I was okay. Probably height sickness, forgot what it's called, as I will sometimes throw up when at heights. It was just weird as the day before we were even higher and I was fine. Home is where the heart is, they say. But I've got like 15 of them under my floorboards now, and I don't think the sound of them still beating or helping my anxiety at all. A memory of when my home was broken into, but it wasn't correct. It was worse. By the Bear of Wisdom. Okay, recently I've been having troubles with kids knocking on my door and running. I have severe PTSD, so this was causing me some issues at home. So I was in contact with a police officer in the area who my mother knew. We met up at a coffee shop to discuss what I was to do to make myself feel safer. This was going fine until my mother brought up an old story about when our house was broken into. My memory on this, waking up Christmas and only having one thing because everything else was taken. I was too young to really remember it, but I'm 35 and not one person has spoken to me about it since childhood, so I always thought my version was correct. Except it really wasn't. What actually happened was, my mother woke up in the night having heard a noise. She knew there was a burglar in the area because my uncle next door had his Christmas presents stolen. This is where I had just confused myself. She got up in the dark and went next door to my room to pick me up. I was around 2 years old and was wide awake, just staying up in my cot, wide-eyed. My mother flicked on the lights and I said something about a man. She freaked out and we were alone in the house, and when she looked down, she saw a little patch of burned carpet and a spent match. They come in through downstairs, lit matches, and just dropped them still lit. While they were walking around, she could follow the entire trail from the back of the house to my room. Back to the present, I was staring at my mother in the coffee shop, coffee halfway to my face, and she's like, "What?" I said, "I do not recall this. I recall something else." Told her quickly, and she was like, "Oh, no, that was your uncle. We nearly died in a house fire." And I had a fucking existential crisis right there because I've been deathly afraid of fires all my life, to the point of night terrors as a little kid, with no explanation. Now, I get it. Fuck's sakes. "Look, Mommy, a shooting star. Make a wish." the child exclaimed as her mother held her tightly, looking up into the night sky. As the asteroid entered the atmosphere, the mother closed her eyes and wished that this wasn't the end. Close Call by Improvement OK 3248. Decided to share a few more experiences in life. This one happened back in my first year of high school. You can't just move anyone into a neighborhood without a background check. I can't even recall how many times I've said this to people and how many times I've been told that's an old saying. I lived in a small town all my life, and the only crimes you ever heard of was robberies of stores and houses. Murders, kidnappings, and big crimes of those types were extremely rare in the 2000s and going forward, but in the 90s it was a different story. To get back on track. Even then, someone knew something. If you don't see or hear anyone around at that time, that didn't mean someone wasn't watching. Everyone knew each other, and if someone didn't know you, they knew most or all of your family members. But everyone, young and old in this small town, can and will agree on this. If someone is an outsider, everyone is on high alert. I've seen a few newcomers in our small town. I would hear a huge majority of people trying to figure out who they were and even telling my generation and below to be careful and watch our backs. And me and my sister did. We stayed at home and never left without our mom or stepdad in tow. They made sure of it. Some new people moved in across the street from our place. We didn't care since we stayed in the house 90% of the time unless it was to go handle business, groceries, and the like. As stated, no one knew these people, so quite a few people in our town were on high alert, and they were right to be. Back then, it was safe to go out at night and the older people could sit on their porches without worry. We went to the store for snacks and some frozen pizza to eat one night around 6 to 7 p.m. since no one felt like cooking. We were turning in. I always watch our surroundings, and this night I was doing that too. I saw a man wearing dark blue jeans and a black shirt. I couldn't tell what material it was, messing with our apartment door. I cut my sister and mother off who were talking. Why is there a dude at our door? By then, my mother noticed him too. Since we had the headlights on, no other lights of anyone else's apartment were on except for the building across the street, and even then, only the first floor, first apartment on the left if you're facing the building outside light was on. And there was a man, leaning against the wall close to the breezeway, watching. "Let's go ahead and get out while the man is right there," my mother said, grabbing her weapon as she told me and my sister to stay close to her. It was then that the guy started walking towards the middle of the road, looking anxious as he shoved his hands into his pants pocket. I tried to look at his face. He kept it turned away from us, looking around the apartment complex as if he was looking for someone. We got to Complex C, Breezeway. That's when I saw the guy who was at our door hurrying from around the building to head back across the street. I didn't say anything until we got into the house. Turned out the guy watching was on lookout, and upon noticing our car returning, tried to warn his friend who was at our door. We locked up, made sure everything was still in place before my mom told me to barricade the door. We've been doing that for some time, but I'll admit I had some nights where I didn't cause I was super tired or sore from gym class working out with weights and such. That night, I did it immediately, and the following few days, nothing happened. A week or so passed before the big thing occurred. Up until that night, I barricaded the door without question. I worked out, so I was sore all over. My mom was firm in making me barricade the door. My sister nor her wanted to do it, and my stepdad was at work, so it was up to me. I admit I lazed around till around 9:30, 10 p.m. before doing it and heading to bed. The next morning, we did our normal routine and left to drop me off at school. My mom was locking the door, at least tried to. "What the hell?" I heard her say, making me turn around to see her struggling with a lock that was completely loose. She fumbles with it, trying to put the lock back into place. Nothing was working, and she was getting frustrated. It was clear someone took our deadbolt off, or at least tried to before giving up and trying to fix it to make it seem like nothing was wrong. She tried to fix it, gave up, and despite me telling her not to take me to school, she took me in anyway. We were all worried and anxious. I mean, our doorknob was loose, anyone could walk in, but it was fixed to seem like nothing was actually wrong. Mom picked up my stepdad from work, told him what was going on, and the maintenance man came to fix the door later that day. Everyone's door was changed with new locks and even deadbolts. No one was happy, but the manager didn't care. On top of that, the gossipers were talking about a resident in Complex D had abruptly moved. We didn't find out until some days later. Someone reported about the woman having 2 guys living with her who were known criminals and not on her lease due to past arrests for break-ins. No one knew where she and the guys went, and they just truly up and left. Over dinner, while my sister washed dishes, my stepdad was talking about everything to a close friend who worked on the police force. After the call, he and my mom talked and he said, "What if those guys were the ones trying to break in, and that's why the lock was broken?" We all stayed silent, me looking at my mom, who looked from me to my dad as we silently let the pieces fall into place. I felt dread in my bones. If I never forced myself to barricade the door that night and just went straight to bed, where would me, my sister, and mom be now? As we extracted a perfectly preserved Neanderthal head from the glacier, one researcher cut his hand on its teeth and suddenly passed out, not breathing. While the team medic performed CPR, I stared in shock at the head's still moving jaw, only snapping out of it by the medic's screams as the researcher bit into her face. The Man on the Bus by Sarah. The story takes place from when I was 15 to 18. I used to take the public bus to go to school and wherever I wanted to go since it was cheap and my parents worked a lot. I recalled this older man on the bus when I was 15. He wasn't super close to me, but he was standing, holding the pole on the bus, looking in my direction. He wasn't super dirty or stood out because of how creepy he was, but just that he was looking at me, and I swore I had seen him before. I did take the same bus, and most people did, so I just told myself that as I continued my way to school. I started to notice him after that. I knew it was because I noticed him that one time, but I realized he was always on the bus, always facing me in some way. It was either a seat that faced my way, standing to do so, and that just started to creep me out. I started to notice him on the other buses I took. Once in a while, I'd be on ones to leave the mall or head back to hanging out with my friends. I realized later is when I posted something on my social medias. When I was 18, my last week of high school, that's when it all came to a head. I decided I needed to walk, stressed out from school and some drama in my friends group. I decided to head down to the park near my house and sit on the swings as I think over some stuff. As I was walking, I felt like I was being watched. I turned off the music I was listening to in my headphones and started to listen around myself. There it was, footsteps behind me. They were keeping pace with mine. Each step I took, they took. I stopped to pretend to be looking for something in my pockets, and they stopped as well. That's when I looked behind me. There he was, this man from the bus, looking intensely at me. I screamed and took off. He followed behind me. There was a gas station that normally had a ton of people in it this time of day. I decided to run that way. I have never ran so hard in my life. My lungs started to burn as my legs did the same. I swore I could feel his hands reaching for me, trying to grab me as I ran. The second I got close to that gas station, I heard his footsteps fade away. I ran into the store and collapsed next to the drinks. One of the other people inside asked if I was okay, which I tried hard to say something, but I was so out of breath and I shook my head. She brought me over a glass of water and talked to one of the employees. After some time, I got my breath back and told the other customer and employee what had just happened. They helped me get a hold of my dad, who came and picked me up as the other two people waited with me. I'm very grateful for them helping me figure out what I needed to do. I was just so scared I couldn't really think. My dad drove me to and from school for the rest of the year, so for a week, and since I went to college in another state, I left that stalker behind as well. I never have seen him since. Man on the bus who stalked me for years. Let's not meet again. What if every night when you go to sleep, your brain shuts down your consciousness completely, ending your existence only to reboot a perfect copy in the morning? The you from yesterday is dead, tomorrow you will be dead, and a perfect copy of you will be thinking this is a silly theory, because they can perfectly remember reading this today, and they believe their you's still there. How my friend and I were stalked for years and nearly kidnapped. By Temporary Paella 194. First part of the story got delayed, so I'm going to shorten it. Basically, at summer camp, me and my friends started to attend in 2019 does surveys every Sunday based on the topics we'll be discussing, so we get public speaking and a more generalized opinion from others in the area. Me and my friend teamed up with 2 counselors and hit the town. Our last stop was a Walmart, and we talked to a bunch of different people. The most memorable was the second to last, an older man that asked us for our names and all about us after he finished answering our questions. At the time, we were both 13 and hardly had any concept of stranger danger, so we gladly answered about ourselves. Anyway, a few days later, an account popped up on our friend's request called Ed Pascus. The account liked a bunch of our old posts, commented a bunch of fire and rose emojis, and called us hot and sexy on our posts. It got to the point where they started to send us inappropriate pics. So, me and my friend ended up blocking the account. Only a few days later, the account was permanently deleted. It didn't show up on our searches for it. That's why we thought it was the end of it. It was not. When we finally got back to school in August, we basically forgot the event altogether. Yet again, this time on both of our Facebook accounts, we got a notice from someone named Ed Parses, wanting to be our friend. Immediately blocked that account again, but not before they had already commented lewd things on my baby pictures. Comments on how pretty my baby blonde hair was, how I looked good in short dresses, things like that. But after that, we both talked to our parents about the situation, and other than keeping our account private, there wasn't much else we could really do. The cops shrugged and said just take the app down completely, but hey, we're teens. Of course we didn't do that. Over the years, till around the end of 2021, this man kept sending friend requests from different accounts with similar variations of their name, which was a bit stupid, but whatever. Though, at the beginning of 2022, this is where it starts getting really creepy. Accounts with the names and pictures of our friends started showing up in our notifications, so obviously we added them thinking it was our friends. We were wrong. Almost immediately, most of our posts had likes or comments on them from this account, and then there'd be multiple DMs of inappropriate pics to both of us. We had blocked the account again. This became a reoccurring cycle, account with friend info, pictures, multiple friends who would get hacked, stolen, duplicated, etc., just so they could friend us again and again without us worrying too much about it. Finally, it got to the point where we stopped adding people from our school at all, even friends. The final time this happened was in the summer of 2022. The swarm of fake accounts had stopped roughly 2 months prior, and seeing as this friend request looked legit by a school friend, I decided to try it out. My friend didn't, she was still wary, but I decided to give it a shot. The compromise was to fully delete our social and get new ones if this account turned out to be the same. I was definitely a stupid 17-year-old, but try not to judge me too harshly. But this account didn't spam our pictures, didn't DM us inappropriate pictures, just interacted with us like any normal school kid would. A little here, a little on our new posts, a little on our story posts, never commenting on our posts. So, finally, we thought it was over. Wrong! Strange things started to happen and became more of an intentional thing than a coincidence. I would post a picture of me and my friend at the park. A couple minutes later, a white truck would pull up in the lot. Eerily close to my car, driver's side door, but we tried not to think too much of it. There were still a few spaces over. Me and my friend were in the swings, basically a straight line of sight of the parking lot. The truck lights remained on, pointing at us for a long time. It got to the point that me and my friend finally started getting worried and anxious, so we hopped off from the swings and decided to take laps around the park instead. The car was far too close to mine for us to be comfortable chancing getting into it at the time. Mind you, it was about 10 p.m. at night, and we were the only ones there. We waited and roamed the park for nearly an hour before the truck finally drove away. That's when we raced to my car and I drove home, looked behind me frequently just in case. This happened in early June and it kept happening. I didn't really notice it, thought it was a one-off occurrence. It never dawned on my head that it happened after I posted pictures and said where I was with my friends. But I started to see a white truck just about everywhere I posted about, even one that would wait outside my high school when I posted a story about my walk to my mom's store only a mile from our school. Again, young and dumb, I didn't think the worst of it. I thought it was a parent waiting for a kid, plus there's a bunch of people that own all kinds of variations of white trucks in my town. So I never put much worry into seeing them all the time. My friend never mentioned any white truck, and if we were together, we rarely saw any of them. But I started to get nervous of them after one time I was walking to my mom's store. I decided to take a glance at the driver of the truck that sat near the car line every day after school. It was the same, if not a bit older, man from our Walmart survey trip of 2019. It was bizarre, definitely. We were never expecting to see him again, especially since we met him in a few towns over from our own. Yet, lo and behold, he's right there. That's when I walked, probably ran actually, to my mom's store. This kept happening, and I finally knew I was being stalked after seeing him that first time because I saw him everywhere on foot. Anyway, this is getting long, so I'll fast forward to the last bit that happened on the last day of our shared summer camp in late July 2023. At this point, I was still 17, and since I was older than most of the new campers, I might as well have been considered a staff member. I drove kids to camp and home every night, and they paid me for the gas money, so it was cool doing it. It didn't bother me since they were in the same town as me, and there were others further away that counselors typically drove home. This day, I posted all the last day campfire pictures right before I left so I could try and save my phone that was suffering from glitches, lack of data, and didn't let me communicate/call with others because my storage was too full. So, I photo dumped a bunch of stuff and it didn't fix the problem. My phone was essentially broken in all but name. It hardly worked, and I bought my current phone after this occurrence. On top of this, one of the older campers that had visited on the last day, 19 male, didn't have a phone either, but he was also in the car with me. In the back seat, I had 3 campers. One didn't have a phone either, and the other 2 were dead. One was charging theirs in my carport, but didn't think much of it, just turned on the radio full blast and gunned it back home. As I pulled off the back roads of our camp up to the intersection, the light turned green and went forward. In the lane next to us was a white truck that kept turning its brights on and off. It was a bit weird, so I sped up, but I didn't think much of it. Side note, my best friend, let's call her Anne for this, has a baby. Anne had her kid at 16, so at this point her kid was nearly a year old. Still very fussy in car rides and such. This became important later because Anne was there for the last day of camp too. She left right before we did when her baby became cranky. Eventually, I didn't see the white truck behind me anymore and I slowed down a bit. It was nearly 9:30 p.m. at this point, late enough for the highway between our towns to be essentially empty. I have this back road that is a bit curvy that leads close to my house and directly to a rich neighborhood. It's the street I typically take to get back to my house from camp if I have no one to take home, and everyone that was a regular in my car called it the detour. It was quite pretty, with a bunch of full evergreen trees and wildlife. The kids, not really kids, but they acted like it, 13 female, 15 male, 15 male, in the back were begging me to go to the detour, since it was the last day of camp. So I caved in and hit on my blinker, turning right onto the back road. Now, listen, I'm not the safest person out there, don't judge me. I'm still basically a kid too, but all the ones in the back love to hang out with windows on the back roads, so I let them stick their heads out of the sunroof, still on the windowsill while holding the bars on top of my car. I went slow, under 10 miles per hour, just so they could do it and not worry about them getting hurt. I mean, there was no one on the back roads. Cops never camp out on these streets, and I was going under the speed limit by like 20. There wasn't really any harm in letting them stick out the windows. Eventually, I let them bully me into taking them around the rich neighborhood that had the cool water fountains and covered bridges on their streets. Apparently, one of the covered bridges caved in, so we had to go around on a super narrow street right next to a large drainage ditch at least 15 to 20 feet deep. As we were going around it, a car comes up behind me. I assumed it was one of the people who lived in the neighborhood, so I was going to speed up to let them get to their house. Finally, we came to a four-way of the rich people's street. Straight forward was a dead end, which is what I originally was going to do. To the left was a broken covered bridge, and to the right was a back around that would take us back to the beginning of the street. But it has no houses/lights back there because the neighborhood is still being built. But let's call him Jake, 19 male. told me to go right. Mind you, one of the campers was sticking their body out of the skylight from the back seat, so I couldn't see out my rearview mirror. I didn't really want to, but I trusted his instincts and turned right. As soon as I did, I started to hear honking behind me. I was a bit startled, and so were the kids in the back seat. I glanced out my side view mirror, but I couldn't see anything past the bright LED lights. I thought it was just because I took so long, so I sped up a bit after I turned right. There was a hook at the end of the hill on the back street, and it makes you tug the steering wheel pretty hard to stay on the road, especially in the dark. The car behind me turned right too. They started flashing their LED brights, honking loudly, and had roll-down windows screaming at us. They kept trying to get in the lane next to us and bump into my car to run us off the road. That is when I knew this was serious. Instantly, I started to scream at the kids in the back seat to sit down, buckle up, and roll up their windows. They barely managed to do that by the time I hit the bender at the end of the hill really hard and gunned it off the street. Driving around the drainage ditch with little problem. I'd done it multiple times. There was no phone in the car to call anyone, least of all the police, so I just ended up speeding down the back streets as the car chased me, trying to run me off the road multiple times. When we came upon the sharp corners, they slowed down. That told me they didn't know this area well, which I used to my advantage. As I was approaching a stop sign for me to go left or right, my house was to the right, so left it was. I yelled at Jake to check my right because I'm not stopping for the sign. I speed past it, the car. This is about the time I noticed that it was a fucking white truck. Tried to hit my bumper again, and I swerved into someone's yard. Grass was damaged the next day when I drove past it. I booked it down the street, hitting every turn as fast as possible, and eventually I thought I lost the truck. I sped past my high school and onto the highway again, where we got off in the first place. I didn't see the truck behind us, and we were all still freaked out. I took a right to go on to another main way and passed by a closed gas station on the way. Very important in a moment. I stopped at a gas station and handed the kids in the back some cash for them to get themselves a drink and a snack to help them calm down. None of them were crying, thank God, the adrenaline junkies they are. They thought it was more exciting than anything. I told Jake to go watch them in the store and make sure they didn't do anything stupid while I filled up the gas tank. We waited at the gas station for about 20 minutes before I went back onto the road to take them home, just in case. I asked them if they had saw the car at all while they were hanging out the window, and only one of them said they thought they did, but the truck's lights were off. It was the same truck from a town or so over from the intersection in front of the back road to our camp. They followed us for nearly 25 minutes. After I dropped all of them off, I was still a bit shaky and decided to try to see if my phone would call someone that I could talk to about what happened. The only contact that would load was Anne, since she was the last person I had talked to on the phone. With a stroke of luck, my phone actually let me call. She picked up, but all I could hear from her side of the line was her crying. Obviously panicking, I asked her what was wrong, and lo and behold, she shared a story eerily similar to what just happened to me. Apparently Anne's baby started crying so loud she could barely focus on the road, so she pulled into the closed gas station I mentioned earlier, right outside our high school, and I sped past. She was giving her kid their bottle when a white truck pulled into the lot. Immediately she was weary because it was closed, and she was right. Less than 30 seconds later, this truck parked horizontally in front of Anne's car to block her in. She immediately started her car again, locked her doors, and pulled off over the grass curb, blocking her from the street. She was not chancing her baby at all. Anne told me the only thing she remembered about the man was that We saw him years ago at the Walmart. His eyes stared at her like she was just a piece of meat for him to have. As she raced home, the truck caught up to her. She turned onto her back road, ran out of gas, and the truck started to flash its lights, honk, run her off the road the entire time. But a couple streets before hers, a little red car pulled out in front of her and started to brake check her as the white truck tried to hit her from behind. It was a mess. She took a chance, sped up, and swung onto the streets to at least lose the red car. The truck booked it after her. Apparently, both of her older brothers were waiting outside for her with some of her friends to help her bring in stuff for her baby. Upon seeing this, as she pulled into the driveway, the white truck sped off. If her brothers weren't outside, that would have been a different story. But anyway, long story short, the truck that followed me all the way back had an accomplice in a red car that followed my friend Anne. When they couldn't catch me, they went for her. Both me and Jake suspected that because I didn't go into the dead end where the man could cut me off, that's probably why it suddenly got violent so quickly. Edit. I never mentioned what happened after this, but the man in the white truck and the other in the little red car were found a town over when there was footage taken of them attempting to kidnap a 7-year-old off a porch and being attacked by their dog. Along with this, we found that there had been several sightings of a white truck around our town, following others doing similar things day after it first happened to us, following cars that had similar descriptions to my friends and I's cars. Our reports were officially filed after we saw the information of the car on Facebook, along with the identity of the man that had been stalking us for years. It took years to get rid of them, but now we don't have to worry about the men anymore. As my peers congratulated me for spending the night in the morgue, I gave them advice to just sing in front of the giant mirror as a distraction if they're ever afraid. I froze in horror as they replied, "What mirror?" Stalker by Demonic Dog 7352. So me and my girlfriend were out smoking at like 4 or 5. It was dark, Alaska winters, and we were just talking on a playground set across the road in a neighborhood. We're lighting and all of a sudden we see a guy walking down the road from the right. Keep in mind that he came from the right and not the left. So we see him and didn't take it seriously, and he walked and then he thinks about walking into the playground. And so he starts thinking if he should or not, so he goes back to where he came from, but instead went into the woods that were next to us and watched us. We started panicking and decided to get up and leave. He quickly runs out of the woods and keeps up with us and starts following us down the road. He came from up the road, so it was odd and a red flag. My girlfriend still wanted to go home, so we almost took a shortcut to her house. But her house was maybe 3 or 2 blocks away, so we decided to walk to McDonald's because it was closer and safest. We look back and we're almost there, and he stops following us. Never again. I pointed the gun right between my wife's eyes as she slept, closed my eyes, and squeezed the trigger. I couldn't tell her that I had just spoken to the president of our son's college, letting us know that he had committed suicide in his dorm room. Shadow People Experience by 3 AM Dream. Some reference points for the story. I'm 29 years old and a quadriplegic wheelchair bound due to an accident when I was 14, leaving me paralyzed with no feeling or movement below my nipples. After years of consideration to make my life easier and stress-free, I decided to get a colostomy. It made sense for me to do to make ease of life easier. For this surgery, I would need to do a 48-hour fast before my colonoscopy, and the next day I would have my colonoscopy and would still not have any food up until the surgery. I roughly went 4 days without eating. Day of the surgery. Very thick, foggy weather. Besides my surgery getting pushed back 3 hours, the surgery went well, and I awoke and was conscious and everything went as planned. I would need to be hospitalized for that evening and the next day, and possibly a third depending on how the nurses felt. That night, as my day wound down and my visitors would leave, I would spend the evening watching TV on my phone until I got tired enough to try and fall asleep. I can't feel that part of my body, so I wasn't in any pain, but they were giving me a small dose of pain medication called Dilaudid just to keep me comfortable and help me get some sleep. My room was dark with just the light from my IV machine and the crack of the blinds from my window illuminating the room from the parking lot street lights from the hospital. I would have had some trouble sleeping that night, mostly feeling like I would sleep 5 or 10 minutes and then suddenly just awaken, but then would quickly fall back asleep just for the same process to happen again and again. This would go on until 3 a.m. I would eventually fall asleep once again, but then I suddenly woke, but this time it felt like I was awakened for a purpose, or I was being watched. The visit. When I woke up laying in my hospital bed, something out of my right peripheral caught my attention. I would turn my head to the right and see a very tall, at least 10 feet tall, silhouette sitting in the hospital chair next to my window. Sitting down, this figure was so tall his head was almost to the ceiling. I would close my eyes and reopen them, as if to make sure my vision was clear, as I didn't know what I was looking at. After doing that, the tall, dark figure was still sitting there, and it seemed like he was looking at me, although he had no eyes or facial features. Oddly enough, I was not scared, nor did I feel uncomfortable. Almost quite the opposite, as it almost seemed like it was there to comfort me. I would look at the figure and say, "Hello?" in the fraction of a second, almost as if I missed him making a move. He would stand at the side of my bed, towering over me, looking down. It's at this point when I almost skip time, and next thing you know, I'm laying flat on my back still, but in a room that is completely white with no walls, no source of light, but very well illuminated. I seem to be laying on a piece of hard rock, similar to granite. When I look up, there are now 2 black figures, both the same size with the same body structure. What was weird is I felt I knew which one had taken me to this new place, and what one I had not had any confrontation with yet. At this point, I'm still very calm and not scared or feeling any harm will be done to me. As I'm laying there, I turn to the first figure and ask him, "Is everything okay?" To which he replies a simple, "Yes," followed by the second figure saying to me, "We are just mending you." Then the first figure would pull a silver dome with bright, shining light beams down over the top of my head. This is where I have my second lapse in time until the dome is pulled away from my face. Once I awaken and turn to the first figure, who I felt I had a better connection with, or possibly just felt like that was who I should be speaking to, I asked him, "What was the purpose of this?" He doesn't answer, but the second figure turns towards me and said, "It is that you have a new purpose." This is where my third lapse of time happens, and I'm floating through the foggy air from outside through my hospital window back into my bed. Almost as soon as I was back in my bed, I was asleep. I would then sleep until 8:30 in the morning, and immediately when I woke up, this is the first thing I thought about. It felt so real, like nothing any dream I had ever had, and I can recall every part of this experience. Immediately, I would Google the definition of mending, a word which I would most likely never use in my life. Definition: repair, something that is broken or damaged. Return to health, heal. Improve an unpleasant situation. After, I would call my wife and tell her the story of what I called being abducted by shadow people. Both of us were really confused on what the meaning of this was, but we both feel it was real and not a dream. I also believe it was not a hallucination based on the pain medicine, as I was on such a low dose and I remember it so vividly. The figures. Both of them were very tall, at least 10 feet, and both were pitch black with no human features I could distinguish other than the shape of their bodies. Although I remember seeing no fingers or nose or any facial features for that matter, it was more or less just a shadow. I don't necessarily know if they talked to me or if I heard their voices telepathically, mainly because there was no mouth. As I stated before, they did not scare me or make me uncomfortable. In fact, it almost felt like I was in a bliss of comfort when I was around them. For some reason, I do feel like the second figure was in charge or the boss, mainly because he seemed to answer for the first figure certain questions, and seemed like he was leading the process. As I stated before, I never saw them walk towards me or necessarily move other than turn their bodies. It almost seemed like the silver dome wasn't even pulled down over my head via arms or anything. Both of the voices were different, but both very monotone. Aftermath. Since having this experience, I have not seen the shadow figures anymore, but the memory is still strong and vivid in my mind, almost as if I am to never forget it. At the time of writing this, it has now been a little over 2 months since this happened. My wife recommends I post on here to see if anyone has any similar situations or may be able to make light of what happened. I did tell my nurse later that day about my experience, and she just said that that's creepy and that most people don't hallucinate off of that pain medicine, especially at the dose I was given. Overall, it wasn't a bad experience, and I actually feel really good about it, and as I stated before, I was not scared or uncomfortable at any moment. Any comments or input is gladly appreciated. Thank you. I just wanted to let you guys know, this person posted this 10 months ago, so as of recording this, it's actually been a year since this happened to them. The gravedigger was told to bury him 8 feet deep, but decided not to because the hospital was no longer looking for bodies. It wasn't because of the grave robbers, the priest said, crossing himself as he peered to the claw marks across the cemetery grass. My Wholesome Ghost by Enlightened Moron 2025. I have lived in this apartment for almost 3 years now, and I have the world's sweetest prankster of all ghosts. Yes, she is a girl. I have first-hand seen this girl and heard her voice. She was frightened by me when I first moved in. My first encounter with her was right on the edge of sleep. I heard a scared girl's voice ask, "Who are you?" I brushed this off as the edge of sleep delusions, things like that. She was very silent for a long time, no activity. At about 6 months of living in this apartment, however, she became mischievous to say the least. I'm a single man, and I have certain adult objects that are battery powered. At 3-ish a.m. one morning, she turned it on. I was frightened, and after regaining control of my nerves, I turned it back off. She would do this another 2 times that same night, so I threw that object into the dumpster and said, "Battery malfunction." Just chill, that was an overreaction. until she also started turning my PC off. This annoyed me something fierce, and after the third time, I angrily told her, "I will cleanse this whole fucking house if you turn it off again." She turned it off again. No problem, I'm overreacting. It was probably the temp of the CPU getting too hot and shutting the PC off. No biggie, it's an easy fix. So I did the maintenance and said ghosts are not real, I'm just being dramatic. Then she started breathing on me when I was trying to go to sleep. Rhythmic, even breaths. No big deal, that creeps me out. I'll just turn the AC off and ensure my window is shut. She still breathes on me. So I took to sleeping with my blanket over my head. Tap, tap, tap. She was tapping the mattress. I still don't have an explanation for this one, but it was always small, annoying stuff. Like my work belt disappearing and then being right back where I left it. The day I knew she didn't want to actually hurt me is when I woke up in the middle of the night, opened my eyes, and saw her face inches from mine. May God strike me down if I am lying. I freaked the fuck out. I sleep with a knife in my reading pillow in the event of a home invasion, and that's what I thought this was. I kicked at her and hit nothing but air, pulled the knife. And she backed away, a surprised expression on her face that turned into what I still think is an apologetic grimace. I blinked, and she was gone. I have never seen her since then. I just remember clothes were modern, jeans and a sweater with shoulder-length straight black hair. When I got a roommate, she stopped all activity. Like she did when I first moved in. My roommate and I stay home through the weekends, both avid gamers. Until today. My roommate's at work and I'm not. We usually have the same schedule as we work at the same place. She gave me a little message today. I was cleaning my bedroom and I was walking out with the trash. She threw a crutch I dragged home from a house party one night on the floor. People will say it probably fell. I have never seen something fall with that much force. It landed a few feet from where I stood against the wall. Like she was telling me, "Take this too." Then, as I was cleaning up some more, she flicked a used Zen at me that was on my desk with enough force to audibly hit my chair. After my room was clean, I began having a panic attack and was sitting on my bed trying to box breathe when she moved the desk chair in front of me left then right. As if to say, "I'm here." Ironically, it calmed me down instead of freaking me out. My roommate just got back. Before I moved out, I wanted to ask him if he had any experiences with her. When I move out, she won't have me to prank anymore, just him. I almost wish I could see that with a bucket of popcorn. "Watch me," read the note attached to the videotape posted through my door. I used to believe I could never kill another person, but now it's the only way to get those images and that sound, oh God, the sound, out of my head. Smelling Things by FastandtheCURIOUS. This might sound stupid, so I apologize, but it's driving me mad. I was getting a strong whiff of cigarette smoke. It will linger for a good 5 to 10 minutes. No one in my flat smokes, none of my neighbors smoke either. I've checked sockets and appliances. We had some bloke out to do a routine check for fire hazards and fire alarms. I asked him about it, and he couldn't find anything that could be causing it. I'll give some more context and explain why I think it could be paranormal. Please bear with. My mom passed away in 2019. She had osteoporosis, COPD, and emphysema. She was a heavy smoker. The doctors told her when she first got diagnosed that she needed to stop, but she never listened, and that's what killed her. Even when she was put on a waiting list for a double lung transplant, she wouldn't stop. She would still be here today if she had followed the doctor's advice and quit. She was heavily into all paranormal. I grew up watching the cheesy ghost shows and talking about the unexplainable with her. It's one of the things we bonded over, and it became somewhat of a special interest of mine. Whenever I smell the smoke, Mom is always the first thing that comes to my mind. It smells like her and the type of fags she used to smoke. The smell seems to follow me around the flat. I thought it might be my mind playing tricks or something, but my dad has even smelled it a couple of times too. The funny and fucked up thing is, the last few years with her were absolute hell. The sicker she became, the more abusive she got to me and Dad. She promised that when she died, she'd haunt us. She wanted to make sure my dad suffered especially. There's been a couple of odd experiences that we haven't been able to explain. We try to joke about it and say, it's Mom coming to get us. My dad's a skeptic, but when these things happened, you can tell he's uneasy about it. Like, for a split second, it really could be Mom saying out to do what she promised. I don't really have anyone to talk to about this. They think it's ridiculous. So, I thought I posted here to get your opinion and to see if anyone else had a similar thing happen. Taking you with me will only slow us both, and taking different routes increase our odds of survival, said the man to his son. But it says here not to take an elevator in case of fire, shouted the kid in the wheelchair, but the man was already climbing down the stairs. Unexplained event in bakery. By extension equals 6415. Just a little backstory. I work in the bakery department for a well-known company. And in my story, there are 3 people involved. My supervisor, we'll call her Lindsay. My coworker, we'll call her Megan. And me. I had just clocked into work at 1:30 p.m. and walked into the back room, got a drink, and saw Lindsay sitting down for her lunch break. I said hi and then walked back to the bakery department. Fast forward to about 2 or 3 p.m. Lindsay was still up front, maybe finishing her break or taking care of some business, and Megan and I were still way in the back in the bakery on the other end of the building. I was walking around after just finishing some tasks when I quickly glanced back at Megan. She was wearing her red shirt and her white hat, kneeling down over the 2 fans that sat next to our 3 big ovens. She seemed to wipe down the fans or something when I noticed Lindsay right next to her with her white hat on and black shirt on, that I had noticed she had on earlier when I first came into work when I saw her on her lunch break. I thought to myself, okay, Lindsay must be finishing with whatever she was doing up front and came back to the bakery. Not thinking too much of it, I turned back and went on with my next task. Just then, Megan came up to me and asked, "Hey, have you seen Lindsay? I heard her calling your name just a moment ago, but she wasn't there when I looked." And I said, "I thought she was with you by the fans. I just saw her next to you." And she said, "No, I was alone." Feeling spooked, I messaged Lindsay and asked her where she was, to which she replied, "Up front? Why? Is everything alright?" I have no clue what that was. We were both shocked at the moment and were left wondering what just happened. If you guys listening to this have any ideas, please let me know. I asked around the store with people who worked in the bakery, and they have some stories too, such as a shadow figure, things moving, falling, opening/closing, lights turn on and off on their own, and things like that. And it's true, I've seen lights flicker and shadow figures as I worked alone. Before we enter into battle, remember well, they may be large and like the taste of human flesh, but their digestive system doesn't work on human, so take a deep breath, try to get swallowed in one piece, and fight your way out from the inside. I might be one let's not meet person, by Ambeir. I'll keep this short. I'm not sure if this post really belongs here. If not, please feel free to take it down. So I'm currently focusing on taking care of myself, therapy, psychologist, things like that. Over the past few years, especially since I had a very toxic relationship, I began noticing certain behavioral patterns I've always had. These didn't really bother me before, but they started to affect my daily life. Since I was young, I felt a bit invisible at school. I remember that even though I did well academically and had high grades, most teachers and students would remember my name and would act surprised when the rankings came in. Many teachers would read my name among the top 3 and ask, "Who is this?" One of the first things I remember doing, which seems strange looking back now, was becoming obsessed with this girl. She was a year ahead of me, Japanese, and seemed really shy. During lunch breaks, I would spend most of my time watching her, noticing who she hung out with, etc. Over time, my interest kept growing until one day I used the lunch break to go into her classroom and look through her things just to find her name. I managed to do it without anyone noticing. I started following her on social media out of nowhere. She didn't even know we went to the same school. We talked for a while. I even told her I was in another class and that I was interested in her. But I never explained how I found her profile. I just said something like, "Oh, we have mutual friends." I made sure to actually have mutual friends before sending her a friend request. I remember one day I decided out of the blue to tell her things about herself that I shouldn't have known because we've never talked about them. Her dress, old blogs she had, the church she attended. I started this as a way to mess with her a little, but I loved how she reacted, slightly frightened, so I kept going until she was actually a bit terrified. After that, it felt too strange to maintain any kind of friendship. I'd even followed her home once before, and she noticed. At the time, it didn't seem like anything too problematic, just kind of weird stuff young people do. Fast forward to today. I'm older now, I have a job, live alone, and overall have a pretty stable life. But I still deal with mental health issues, which I didn't understand the cause or condition of until recently. I've had a few relationships, most of which didn't end well. Some because of things I did, others because of things people did to me. I remember feeling a strong impulse for revenge against those who broke my heart, fantasizing about stalking them, making them feel afraid, etc. I won't go into detail about every relationship, but the person I ended up dating had serious mental health issues as well, borderline personality disorder, depression, and more. She was very wealthy, so our lives were very different. She was also younger. Every now and then, she would bring up the idea of opening our relationship or mentioning how she and her friends thought she should enjoy life more before settling down. We began a circle of dating and breaking up. Everything started spiraling, and every time we got back together, the relationship felt more and more distorted. Eventually, we both cheated on each other, and the relationship ended for good. But for some reason, my broken mind couldn't let it go. I was so hurt by everything that had happened, and this time, it was much harder to resist those impulses towards violence, stalking, and instilling fear. I seemed like a normal person at work, in the office, but in my mind, there was a voice that really wanted vengeance. At some point, it became unbearable. After work, I started hanging around places near her house, supermarkets, parks, any spot we got together. I made sure she knew I was or had been there. Doing this made me feel better, less anxious. My mind would feel at peace for a while. We never talked directly about it, nor did she confront me. Eventually, I managed to get over it and started controlling these impulses again until they disappeared. When I began treatment and started talking about all this and other issues, like my lack of empathy, struggling with socialization, and mimicking emotions I didn't really feel, I began to see how messed up this behavior was. Now I'm in treatment and I'm close to a diagnosis, though since it's not 100% confirmed, I don't think it's helpful to share it here. If you're feeling things like this, seek help. I'm not the type of person who wants to give in to bad thoughts or impulses. I want to be a good person despite everything. Apologies to anyone I may have hurt with my actions. Thank you for listening. I didn't think you'd be so small-minded over a 16-year age gap, the man said to his mother after introducing Sandra. Son, she replied, that's the woman who put you up for adoption. Creepy Encounter by Sydney. This happened back in 1986 when I was working for a bank in the bookkeeping department in Richmond, Virginia. Where I worked in bookkeeping, we called statements rendering. We kept all the personal and corporate checks filed there. On the 1st and 2nd of each month, we had to mail out by hand all of the corporate statements. Everyone in the department, no matter your regular job, had to help that day, and we sometimes didn't get out until 8 or 9 that night. Usually we got an hour for lunch, but on those days we got 30 minutes. I can't remember the exact day this story takes place, but it was in 1986, right after we bombed Libya, so I'm thinking April or May. My friend Em and I were discussing what to do for lunch because, as I have stated before, we only had 30 minutes that day. We decided to go to Popeyes because it wasn't too far away and thought we could make it in 30 minutes. So that's what we did. My friend was driving because I didn't have a car at the time and took the bus everywhere. The bus system in Richmond was really good. We got to Popeyes and got in line to order. We were staying there as a guy came in and got in right behind us in line. He was staring a hole right through me. I turned back around and stared straight ahead. Em and I kind of looked at each other with a "what's wrong with this guy" look. We got our food and went and sat down. Em sat down across from me and whispered that when I got to sit down, that guy's eyes followed me the whole time I was walking back to the table. That's when I started getting worried. He came and sat down at the table behind ours, and I was facing him. The whole time, he just sat there and stared at me. I would try and sit so Em's head was blocking his view of me, but he would move over to continue to stare. We had to sit there and wait until he finally got up and left. After he got up and left, we laughed about it, but the laughter didn't last long. He didn't leave. He was waiting for us in the parking lot in his car. As I stated before, it was right after we had bombed Libya. He looked Middle Eastern, and I started thinking we were going to be kidnapped. We decided to walk back to where the arcade games were just to see if we were being paranoid. And we weren't. He drove over to where he knew we were. Now we started panicking. Our time for lunch was running out, and we didn't want this guy following us back to work. So we went to the payphone there. This was before cell phones, and called our office to let them know what was going on. Our boss was at lunch, so we had to leave a message. After that, we stood there trying to decide what to do to lose this guy. The parking lot had just one row of spaces, and there was an entrance out to the main street, another one to the back going out to the parking lot where there was a back way to work. By this time, he had pulled his car out and was facing the front entrance to the main road. I told my friend to back up and go out the other way through that parking lot, and we can go back to work that way. That's what we did. We saw him zoom out the front way and try to find out which way we went, but he never did. We got back late and told them what happened. They all burst out laughing and said it sounded like something out of Miami Vice, and then I burst out crying. My friend yelled at them that there was nothing funny about it. This is my story, the day I thought I was going to be kidnapped. As a necrophiliac, I've never been this attracted to a living woman before. I blushed at his joke, my heart fluttering. It was only when the hiccup started that I realized I had forgotten to go to my yearly pacemaker checkup. Potential Home Invasion by GossyGirl. Years ago, when I was pregnant, we were just getting ready to go to bed, and it was late, about 1:30 a.m. This woman knocked on the door, and my husband answered. She was clearly high and jittery and looking around everywhere. She asked if she could use the toilet. My husband said no, this is not a public restroom. We both got a really bad vibe off of her. She was quite a big woman, and clearly something wasn't right with her. She started to try and open our security door, rattling the handle, but we've always been very conscious of keeping it locked the minute we walk in. My husband told her to go away, and he shut the door. She started banging on the door, screaming that she needed to use the toilet. My husband opened the door again and told her to piss off or he was going to call the cops. She stopped, froze, and for about 20 seconds stood there, staring at us, and then she turned around and walked away. We turned off all the lights and looked through the blinds and saw her next door talking to two people. I said to my husband that that was a setup for a home invasion, and he agreed. The thing was, I'd actually seen this woman around before quite a few times, so she could have known I was heavily pregnant, and that would make us a good target, because we'd be more compliant. People have a tendency to be more compliant when they're trying to protect their family. I reckon she followed me home. I've never seen her again. Edit to add. Thought it would be good to let you know that this was in Australia. Halfway through cleaning out the large storage locker I'd purchased, I found a box containing hundreds, if not thousands, of pictures of me and my family taken from afar. I was so disturbed by the discovery that I didn't grasp the significance of the Polaroid of me opening the locker, taken from inside the unit with the word "soon" written on it. Someone nearly broke into my house. By Stay Affectionate 5987. I never wanted to tell this story to anyone for years. I don't know why, but here I am now. I was 16 years old, and sometimes I would spend time at my grandmother's for privacy. My grandmother lived alone, and many people in her building didn't know about me. The floor where my grandmother lived had 2 more apartments, one of which was rented out but was vacant at the time, and the other had some inheritance issues, so no one was using it. My grandmother went on a trip, which everyone in the building knew about. They have some Facebook group, and I wanted to be alone, so I slept alone in the apartment. The first night went okay, but around 3 in the morning, while I was talking to some friends, I heard a strange sound at the door. I was wearing headphones, and at that moment, everything became quiet, both in the game and in the conversation with my friends. I went to check and I heard the sound of the lock. I looked through the peephole and saw a man trying to break in. He had a scarf over his face and a cap. He was using some tools to break the lock, and then he opened one of the latches. Thank God I had 2 latches, otherwise who knows what would have happened. Now, I could have reacted much better, but I went to get my katana. It was hanging on the wall in my room, and I stood by the door. I heard him trying to break the other lock, and I shouted, "Who are you?" He froze, but he continued trying to break the lock. "If you come in here, I'll stab you with the katana." He continued until I said, "The police are already on their way." I lied. The man just walked away. The man didn't even live in our building because after 2 months, I got to know everyone, and no one moved out during that time. Weirdo, please, let's not meet again. Update, someone is watching me. There hasn't been any activity since the night after I originally posted. I was on a phone call the very next night with a friend when I noticed someone staying outside, completely shrouded in darkness. I proceeded to talk loudly about how some creep was watching me and they better watch out. Stupid, yes, but it seemed to work because all was quiet after that. Or so I thought. Tonight was one of my oldest friends' last night in town, so I was out till 9:30 p.m., drove 2 friends home and then myself. Since it was so early, I wasn't that worried, but still alert. I drove up the side of the street he hit on last time, even though it was out of the way, and saw nothing out of the ordinary. I noticed one of the new houses that had been built had its lights on, which I didn't think much of in the moment. Fast forward an hour, and I started hearing a weird, loud banging sound across the way. I know it's risky, but I'm not letting some asshole dictate my comfort, and I've been watching for activity/pretending so I maybe catch them. So I've been keeping my window open as usual. Hence why it was dumb to razz him the other night by talking about someone watching me. But I digress. It stopped, so I wrote it off. Big mistake. Shortly after, I started hearing banging again, but this time I could actually feel it. It was coming from my house. I was genuinely freaked out, like Knives Out status, but much more cowardly, cowering on my bedroom floor with my ear pressed to the door and knife in hand. It was a strange, hollow sound that didn't seem like it was the front door. It wasn't. I once again called 911, describing what's happening and thinking they probably were going to write it off because I sound crazy. I still feel in shock because this only just happened. Thankfully, the kind dude on the line definitely took me seriously and said someone would be on their way. For the record, the police department is 3 minutes drive down from my house. I ended up tiptoeing downstairs to see, and once again felt my heart stop. I went to the front door, ducked down, and there wasn't anyone at the front door. Then the banging starts again, and I can tell how close it is. I got to the side window that overlooks the garage, and there's when I saw him, dressed in black, hood pulled far over his face, banging wildly on the garage door with a fucking crowbat. I honestly don't know why he wasn't using the crowbar to break in, but I'm super glad he didn't, as the door inside the garage that leads into the house is always left unlocked. To say I panicked is a vast understatement. I nearly pissed myself, which I think is understandable. I'm just standing there, peeking out the window, watching this guy wail on my garage door with a crowbar, thinking how fucking unhinged he must be and how much I want the cops to just get there now, when, just like before, he runs off. I quite literally just got done giving a report to the cops that showed up. My family was woken up and had to talk to them as well, as they are the homeowners. And now they're both so freaked out that my dad just ordered 4 exterior cameras to monitor the house. I don't think it's over yet. This man has some reason he's targeting my house, possibly me, since he started out by watching outside my window. So, to this man, you better hope we never meet. I have a crowbar too. And as of recording this, that was the last update from OP, which they posted this over a year ago. So hopefully the intruder never came back and found out OP had their own crowbar. After trips to the bathroom and removing their boots and clothes, the escape pod still refused to launch, its system declaring it's 3.5 kilograms overweight and satisfying the prediction fuel/distance ratio. The girl in the corner looked up at everyone staring at her and started cradling her bump. I swear all truck stops are haunted or a portal to hell. By Anonymoose. I worked in the truck stop industry for about 15 years. All the following stories took place at the same location. I worked there less than 18 months. If people are interested, I have other stories at other locations, but this one had the most frequent occasions of weird stuff that happened. I was given an opportunity to help open this brand new location, and since it came with a fat raise and a promotion, I definitely accepted it. It now has been about 5 years since the location opened. I don't believe there is a single employee left that was there when we opened of the over 60 employees we hired prior to opening day. On opening day, not long after the ribbon cutting ceremony, a woman delivering flowers dropped the flowers on her sandaled foot and sliced her foot open, bleeding all over the entrance. Within a week of being open, we had water and sewage coming up through all the drains, including sewage ones outside all over the property. It had not been raining. It wasn't like a flood situation weather-wise. We had no idea what caused it to suddenly happen. And just as quickly as it happened, it went away. Plumbers were baffled. A couple months after we opened, we faced a severe storm that destroyed the high-rise interstate sign and caused a 7-hour power outage. I had sent several people home, but I had kept a couple of employees in case the power came back. As we sat in the restaurant dining room chatting under electric lantern light, An employee who was a local resident and had lived in the town all of her life mentioned that people were a little worried when this place was announced to be built because this property had been rumored to be a Native American burial ground for years. I had zero way to prove or disprove if this was accurate, but given the events getting more serious as time went on, it makes you wonder. When the power did come back, despite the several steps I took, like unplugging all the equipment to make sure the surge wouldn't fry stuff, we lost several pieces of expensive equipment. Some of this equipment was crucial and caused major operation problems for weeks until it could be replaced. The first winter after we were opened was the coldest in years. So cold that we had to buy space heaters for the servers in the electric room so the servers wouldn't freeze. We had issues with frozen pipes, especially in the truck care center and the restaurant. 6 months after opening was the first death. A truck driver came in to take a shower in one of our shower rooms, and we had sensors on the doors to let us know how long someone had been in there. If the timer had been going for a couple of hours, we would knock on the door to see if maybe they had actually left so we could clean it for the next driver. The employee knocked on the door of the shower that had been in use for a couple of hours, and there wasn't an answer. She used the key to open the door, and the driver was on the floor. He had died of a stroke. He had been driving a semi for 30 minutes before he entered that room. The employee who had opened the door was significantly traumatized. The company did a great job of offering support for her, but she didn't last much longer after that. A few weeks later was one of the weirdest things I'd ever seen. I was working on the restaurant side of the truck stop as the restaurant manager had quit after a series of bad things had happened to her, and they asked me to move into the role temporarily. The assistant manager on the store side came over because the freakiest thing had just happened. She pulls me into the store side office and pulls up the camera to show me what happened. A small 4-door sedan pulls into the lot, but doesn't pull into the gas station side, pulls into the truck stop side where the semi-trucks pull in. He parks next to the maintenance shed, which is located adjacent to the main building, and very close to a large trash compactor. He got out of the vehicle, opens one of the doors, and pulls out a trash bag. He throws the trash bag on top of the compactor. He then gets in his car and leaves the property. I don't remember exactly how long, as she had fast-forwarded the footage, but I think it was an hour or two later he returned. He pulls back next to the compactor, climbs on top of the compactor, and chucks the bag onto the roof of the maintenance shed. He then climbs down off the compactor and gets into his car and leaves, never to return. This was when he was noticed by an employee who had been outside gathering trash to take to the compactor. The maintenance shed is more of a small building/garage. It's about 20 feet by 20 feet. If the employee had not seen him throw it up there, it probably wouldn't have been noticed maybe ever, as the building was as high as a 1-story building. Once the employee saw the individual leave, he goes into the shed, gets a ladder, and goes to get to the bag on top of the roof of the shed. He brought the bag inside the store to show the assistant manager. Inside the bag is a ton of paper. These documents list hundreds to thousands of addresses across the United States. Under each address is a specific hidden location on each property where a body could be found. No information on who the individual were, just sex and location of the individual/individuals on the properties. The locations spanned from coast to coast, but I didn't get a chance to look too deeply into them. I was really freaked out, and I thought that touching them would maybe contaminate something, so we just put what we had pulled out back in the bag. The obvious answer here was to call the police, so that's what happened next. Now, the thing about truck stops is that they are more often than not in remote locations among the interstate for obvious reasons. The town this truck stop is located in has 3 police officers in total. It is a town with less than 1,000 people, so when I saw the chief of police show up, it was because he was the highest ranking officer of the 3 in town. He hated us as truck stops being crime and suddenly had a lot more work to do. He comes in, watches the footage, looks in the bag. And the most frustrating thing here is that he's not concerned in the slightest. He asked us what we wanted him to do about it. It probably was a prank, etc. He took the items with him, filed out a form for request for the footage, and left. My hope here is that he at least forwarded it to the FBI. A couple of weeks after this, there was a body found of a bound, nude, and recently deceased man across the street at a dump. Because it was a dump, they had no idea where the individual had originated from. Sometime in following weeks was the second death on the property. It was a driver that had died in his truck. Somewhere in the middle of this, we had another severe storm and the interstate high-rise was destroyed again. We had another weird incident involving abandoned things, but this one had a resolution. A driver came in to show that someone had left ratchet straps and small children clothes folded up neatly next to a diesel pump. The combination of the items was alarming for me, so I got on the camera system and called the police. I was able to find the truck that had left the items, and luckily I got the one amazing police officer in the town this time. She actually did her job and followed up with me to let me know that she had found the driver and called him. He had his kid in the truck for a while for summer break, but it had ended, so he brought her home with her mom and wasn't going to see his kid for a while. So when he was cleaning his truck, he had these clothes and some straps he didn't need and thought someone else could use the items. He didn't think about the combination of the two raising eyebrows, and he honestly was really grateful that someone would be worried and followed up in case. A couple months after the first year mark, the state DOT had to shut down the on-off ramp to the interstate exit, started to collapse, and they were worried that the overpass could collapse as well. We had nearly zero business for weeks as construction crews rebuilt the ramps and repaired the overpass. It was during this time that I earned a promotion to general manager role and was moved to a different location. I kept in touch for a while, especially with my former boss and the assistant manager. The incidents continued. A couple months after I left, there were 2 major incidences, but I can't remember what came first. One involving an individual that entered the building with a machete. He was aggressive. The employees were terrified. I wish I hadn't deleted it, but there is footage of a state troopers coming in with AKs and drop kicking the guy. Unsure where this person came from as he walked, and this location was 10 to 15 miles from the nearest town. The second was a customer attacking a teenage cashier because he didn't get the customer's lotto ticket correct and got into a brawl with the maintenance guy who came to the kid's defense. Slowly over time, I lost touch with them and they both left the location, so I stopped getting the stories. I don't know if they are continuing. Haunted? Portal to hell? I don't know. But what I do know is now I avoid truck stops like the plague. The smell of bleach makes my nose burn as I clean the crime scene, needing to erase any trace that my wife was here. If I failed to cover up her kills, I would be next. My Sub-Story by Sydney. This happened to me back in the 80s when I was working at the bank in Richmond, Virginia. My friend Marty and I would eat lunch together most days. We worked at a data center where there wasn't much around us except a sub shop across the street. We would get our food and walk back and eat in our lunchroom. Most of the time, we would get a 12-inch sub and split it between us. On this particular day, we decided to go get our normal 12-inch tuna sub and split it. We purchased a sub like we did all the other times and brought it back. We both took our half of the sub. I was the first to take a bite. After I bit into the sub, it started crunching, and it wasn't lettuce. Marty was looking at me so funny. I spit it out and ran my fingers through it. All through the sub were tiny pieces of glass. That freaked us out. I'm so glad I didn't swallow it. We got both of our halves of our sub and took them back over to the sub shop. We walked in and she looked surprised to see us back. We told her what we found in our food and she thought it was so funny. She asked if we wanted another sub and we said, no, we want our money back. She went back and got our manager and he acted nonchalant about the whole thing. Well, that put Marty and me into revenge kind of mode. I could have really been injured. We got our money back and went back to the office. We looked up the number for the health department and Marty called them. She explained what we had just been through and they told us they would check it out. A couple days go by and the health department gets back to us. They went to the shop and they were using a cracked crock pot to store the tuna in. Well, they gave them 24 hours to get a new crock pot and they needed to discard the tuna immediately. When they went back to check if they had complied, they were still using the same crock pot. I guess they thought it was still a joke. They ended up getting closed down and it turned into a car lot. But it's so scary what could have happened if I swallowed that glass. Well, this is my scary sub-story. It may not be the scariest, but it sure as hell freaked me out. My wife poses on the bed taking a mirror selfie to see me in lingerie she bought for when I come home from deployment. If you look closely at the window behind her, you can see my eyes peeking through the blinds. I viewed the property of a man who murdered his previous tenant. By Fox-Mulder. When I finished uni, I moved back home until I found a job. As soon as I could afford it, I set up a profile on the website Spare Room. I was contacted by James, who had a room for rent on the outskirts of town I worked in. It sounded good, but he wanted to talk on the phone before inviting me to view it. We had a chat one evening, and it turned out we had some things in common. We both enjoyed fitness, particularly swimming, and we were movie buffs. By the end of the call, it had felt like chatting to an old friend, and I was looking forward to meeting him. James didn't specify his age, but I assumed he was in his 20s like me. When I went to view the property, he actually came out of the house next door to greet me. When he introduced himself as James, I was pretty shocked. He was at least 50, dressed quite conservatively, and looked like he was wearing a hairpiece. If he had told me on the phone he was in his early 20s, I wouldn't have questioned it. I went ahead with the viewing, but I'd already decided I didn't want to rent a room from him. I wanted to live with people who were a similar age to me. I was also put off by the house decor, which looked like it hadn't changed since the 80s. When I viewed the bedroom, it looked like it was occupied by a young person. There were several pairs of trainers and a game console. James said the previous tenant, Mark, was moving to London for work. Coincidentally, my name is Mark too. James invited me to sit in the living room after the house tour. I didn't want to be rude, so I did. He explained that he cared for his elderly mother who lived next door. Then he started complimenting my style, saying I looked cool. He proceeded to put his hand on my leg, which made me feel very uncomfortable. When he asked if I was interested in the room, I said I had other properties to view, but would be in touch. I then made an excuse to leave. Everything about him screamed red flag. I just wanted to get out of that house. As soon as I was back in my car, I called my mom to tell her how freaked out I was and I absolutely would not be living there. James texted me a few days later to ask if I thought any more about moving in. I lied and said I found somewhere closer to town. I did eventually find something with some other young professionals, which turned out to be great. Some months later, our town was shocked by the news that a man's body had been found in the fields on the outskirts. He was later identified as Mark. I didn't think much of it until I saw that the murder suspect was his landlord, James. The same James whose house I viewed. I saw him on the news and got instant chills. He was later convicted of Mark's murder. Contrary to popular belief, vampires can have children, and we learn from childhood all the ways of vampire kin, from the best blood to drink to all the dangers we must avoid. Today, I accidentally stepped into the sunlight, but nothing happened. Helen's Bridge by Only One Morgan 22. It was right around this time of year 3 years ago when my current boyfriend and I first met. A few weeks later, went camping on Halloween weekend in the woods right next to the supposedly haunted Helen's Bridge near Tunnel Road in Asheville, North Carolina. It was a beautiful spot up there with so much overlook, and with the bridge being right there with all the stories we had been told about being haunted, true or not, it made it just scary enough for a little thrill. I wish I could say Helen's Bridge, as we had planned, was the scariest part about the weekend. Not even close. It was Halloween, and we were planning on going to a show that night. T, my boyfriend, and I planned with each other that I was going to get ready at camp while he walked into town to get some drinks and something to eat before we left. If he didn't make it back before dark, it would not be more than 30 minutes after that. I didn't have any problems with that. I had a lot of experience solo camping and was pretty woodsy. The most that would spook me would be a bear if one happened to wander up. We had chosen an area that was super secluded and more backcountry sort of camping, so it'd just be us for the whole weekend. More romantic that way. Like usual, it didn't take me long to get ready, and it was super peaceful up there. I knew it was going to be around 45 or so before he got back, so I decided to read a book in the tent with the door open for some air. 10 minutes into reading, I heard a fairly large branch break a couple of feet behind my tent. I had learned how to gauge how large of an animal it might have been in the past by the sound they make walking through the woods. This one seems big. A bear. It wasn't quite pitch black out yet, so I got out of my tent, turned around to shout at it to get it to run away. And there stood a huge, probably 6'5", 6'6" man, completely taken off guard and pretty nervous about the situation. Without thinking, I said hi. He said hello and walked closer. Looking back, I wish I had not been so friendly, but it had been habit. I thought he had just set up camp probably somewhere nearby and would be doing a quick introduction and retreat. I was horribly mistaken. I didn't know if he was saying things trying to get a rise out of me, scare me. I don't know what parts were true and still don't. He immediately started saying something like, "What's a pretty little thing like you doing alone in the woods all by herself? Don't you know bad things happen to pretty little girls like you?" I ignored him and said I wasn't alone. My boyfriend was right down the hill going to the bathroom and would be right back. I hoped this would cause him to leave. But instead he said, "What if I told you that I've been watching you all for a few days now, and I know you're lying? He's gone for a minute," he said. "What are you hiding out in the woods? I'm hiding because I raped my girlfriend's sister. I can tell that bothers you. It bothers you a lot, doesn't it?" My heart sank completely, and with a complete loss for words, I'm fairly certain my stomach was going to fall out of my ass. I was shaking and was hoping he couldn't tell because of it getting darker. I wanted to appear annoyed and calm, just annoyed at his existence. I rolled my eyes, grabbed my water bottle to give my brain a second to figure out how to tell him to get the fuck away from me. Maybe just that. Yep, let's go with that. When I looked up to tell him, he had somehow, extremely quietly, gotten significantly closer to me. Close enough to punch me in the face, cause me to fall back. I was probably knocked out for only a second. When I opened my only one eye I could, he punched me again and tried to get on top of me. Terrified, I rolled away and just kept rolling till I got up and started running. To where? I didn't know. I had no light and no shoes and no phone. And it was a good mile or so before any neighborhood. I was screaming and I could hear him screaming, chasing after me. "You're dead when I catch you. You're so fucked when I catch you." I got to a car and hid under it. I didn't see him after that. I was too scared to go anywhere near there, especially at night. So I asked someone in a house I knocked on to use their phone to call the police and my boyfriend. Ironically enough, turns out the monster's name was Jason. Halloween got extremely too real that year. "Alright, miss, if you just stand right here, the AI will scan you and tell you whether you go to college, into the workforce, or enter one of the alternative pathways," said the government employee, pulling me onto the platform. My heart sank when output on the screen flashed breeder. "Our religion is the Word of God. We are peaceful and we love everyone equally." The hangman wrapped the noose around the pastor's own son as the man himself watched with cold eyes, observing with a sick satisfaction as his own flesh and blood was killed for the crime of loving in a different way. The Bridge by User Unknown. This is or was going to be short, but the memory sprung into my mind a couple days back and I thought it'd be worth sharing. I live in North Wales, UK. For anyone who's had the pleasure of visiting, it truly is a beautiful place to live, though for an adolescent boy, it certainly lacks in things to do. As a result, my friends and I would often find ourselves mindlessly exploring areas of countryside and coastline. Despite it being quite sparsely populated in comparison to the closest cities, there is a dual carriageway running right along the coast from Wales into England. Also, train tracks run alongside the road for most of its course, occasionally passing overhead via a small cement bridge. Anyway, there was one night a few years ago when about 4 of us randomly decided to try and explore the inside of one of these bridges, as one of the group had observed a manhole cover nearby, which we believed to be the entrance. On closer inspection, we discovered that several tools would be required in order to gain entry. We returned with the necessary equipment and proceeded to unbolt the cover. This had to be done stealthily as the train track was right beside us. Not close enough to be any danger, but definitely a significantly small distance to cause panic for any train driver. And panic usually means police. It wasn't long before we removed the heavy steel disc and had started descending the ladder down into the structure. Once we had all safely reached the bottom, we decided to progress into the other side. At this point, we were totally confined into the narrow space that leads into the main area. If you're confused as to what the hell this bridge is supposed to be, you probably should be, because it was rather peculiar. I mean, I would never have known there was even inside had we not noticed the manhole. So, as we squeezed and crouched and at one point scraped along our bellies to the other side of the structure, there was a growing sense of claustrophobia between us. The distance from end to the other is surprisingly long, but by the halfway point you can look down through the narrow gap onto the motorway below. This was actually pretty cool, which helped keep us calm in a strange way. At this point, apart from the mild discomfort and confinement, we were still just a group of guys on an adventure. This was about to change dramatically. No more than a few meters beyond the hallway, which we could tell due to the symmetry of the passageway through the bridge, one of us claimed they could see objects in the distance at the far side. Slightly hesitantly, we agreed to investigate. Bad move. I reached the end first, and let me tell you, I never felt the same sense of dread before or since. In front of me was a single fold-away chair positioned facing a wall. On the wall was a partially torn page from a newspaper or a magazine, showing a fully naked lady in an erotic position. The reason I don't just refer to it as porn is because something was different about it. I can't put my finger on it, but it seemed more sinister than sexy, if that makes any sense. More disturbingly, the eyes of the woman on display had been cut from the page, removed with precision, not just hastily ripped off. The scene that lay before us had rendered us completely speechless, and an overpowering sense of panic could be felt collectively. That was when we found the condom. The hideous, gut-wrenching, blood-drenched condom. Needless to say, we got the fuck out of there as fast as humanly possible, smashing our knees and shins against the sharp cement edges that lined the path to the ladder by which we had entered. Of course, we all prayed to God that the manhole hadn't been resealed, as it was impossible to tell until we reached the ladder itself. Thankfully, the exit route was clear, and we promptly dashed as far away as our legs could carry us. I'm sure this ending comes as a disappointment to some of you listening to this, as we, luckily, never bumped into the twisted individual who sits in that chair. But I must stress how radically out of norm this was given where I live. The reason I mentioned the population earlier was with purpose. There is easily enough people here to escape the realm of crazy country folk, yet nowhere near enough people to have someone clearly lose grip on society without someone taking notice. For example, there was literally only one homeless man who everyone in the area knew and grew fond of, eventually resulting in a mass gathering at his funeral when he passed away. I sometimes think, though not recently as I had more or less forgotten about that night entirely, about the person who climbs down into that bridge and navigates through the darkness to sit facing a wall and do God knows what that ends up with a condom full of blood. You honestly couldn't envision a more surreal situation. It has just come to my realization that what we unearthed that night has not been uttered to another soul. As a naive teenager, it was a type of thing you just want to forget. But thinking about it, we probably should have let the police or at least someone know about what was down there, because it wasn't the doing of a healthy-minded individual. So, there you have it. Apologies for the length. I got a little carried away as it's my first Let's Not Meet post, and I wanted to make the reading experience as similar as reality as I could. Now I'm a few years older and hopefully a bit braver, and I'm considering going down there again, accompanied of course, to see what fucked up shit might be waiting. This could well happen in the next couple of days, and rest assured I will 100% post an update as I currently have no job, so time is plentiful. Edit. As promised, here are the photos from the return visit. We went early in the evening, so there was still plenty of light. As a result, I have decided to use a simple filter on most of the outdoor shots, simply to reduce the light and give it the eeriness it deserves. Unfortunately, I hadn't accurately conveyed my plans to those accompanying me, and they had presumed I just wanted to check out the small area before the entrance to the passageway, as they had been there before. When I expressed my wishes to navigate through the bridge, they instantly noped the fuck out of there. As you can imagine, I was massively disappointed. I hope to go back soon with a different bunch of guys, but I can't promise when. Edit 2. Here are the pictures taken from last night's return to the bridge. This will be the last time I veg you down there. Thanks for listening. I hope you enjoy. Early yesterday evening, a friend and I decided to embark on a revisit to the awful place in the hopes of finding some remnants of the twisted scene that had been stumbled upon several years ago. We were not disappointed. If anything, it was even worse than what I had imagined. Aside from what you will see in the photos, the general environment within the bridge structure is practically uninhabitable, as it bloody well should be, and stomach-turning to say the least. The amount of dust in the passageway is actually quite unbearable, but that is nothing compared to the constant stench that must be endured. Also, the heat didn't help the situation either. I won't ramble on, but I must express how vulnerable you feel when navigating through the tunnels. Even with two of us, both carrying appropriate weaponry, the sense of evil was overpowering. The tension is amplified tenfold by the fact that, had we encountered someone or something, the layout of the structure and the multiple tight squeezings mean a safe, speedy exit is nigh on impossible. It truly is a hellhole. Without further ado, here is what lies at the bridge. Enjoy. I had forgotten the passageway don't actually run all the way through the structure. It is sealed off at the midway point, so the slight dip above the supporting pillar is where the sinisterness took place. This makes me wonder, is there anything untowards on the other side? The entrance, which, unnerving, was already open. You can also see the train tracks immediately to the right. The descent. If you look closely, you can see my friend's left hand still gripping a rung. The rest of him disappeared into the darkness. This is the small area before you enter the passageways. Even in daylight, it's virtually pitch black. Very creepy. I had to use a flash to capture this one. None of us realized there was even graffiti on the wall until looking at this photo. And here is the start of one of the 3 passageways that leads to the middle of the bridge. Creepy as hell. When you are staring down the passageway, it's virtually complete darkness. You can see your hand in front of your face. Another entrance, I haven't used any filters on this one, so you can see exactly what it looks like. Again, flash had to be used. To give you an idea of the size, you would definitely have to squeeze through this one on your stomach. It wouldn't be a super tight squeeze, but it wouldn't be possible to crouch. Also, the slight rising surface you can see just through the hole is an indicator what the rest of the passage leading to the dip looks like. Random raising surfaces and narrow gaps, making it impossible to stand up. On the way out, unfortunately, to be continued. The bridge revisited. Instantly, we came across what appeared to be a makeshift bed. The sheets accompanying the foam suggest it would have been used to sleep on. Going further into the passageway, it opens up slightly. I included this to demonstrate the amount of dust particles in the air. It was quite a pain to get any clear photos from any sort of distance other than close-ups. This is a broken padlock that I believe would have originally secured the entry, not even a third of the way through the bridge at this point. A used candle. Random pieces of rope. Now this is where things get a bit disgusting. That liquid definitely wasn't milk. That's a standard milk container in the UK. And here was the first confirmation that the intense smell we were experiencing was in fact human feces. The brown substance on the paper was undeniable. This was a second, more damning confirmation. And a bag with loads of human feces. This nearly made us vomit. Just as we approached the end of the room, we stumbled upon this disconcerting tape. It reads, "Crime scene, do not enter." The narrow entrance to the final opening, at this stage even with 2 powerful torches, or flashlights on the other side of the world. You honestly could not see if there was anyone/anything in the end room. This made for a particularly nerving decision to proceed. Here you can see how tight this section is. Not fun. The entrance to the end room, taken with no flash to get an idea what this may have looked like in the candlelight, which we presume must have been the light source for this sick individual. Truly the stuff of nightmares. All of the following images were taken inside this room. Here goes nothing. Literally the first thing I see after squeezing into the end of the room is a knife. Oh shit. Next up is the raunchy image. You may not be able to see it properly, but the vagina area has been burnt through with a cigarette. It's only a small hole, hence you may struggle to see, but very strange nonetheless. Also, when I was grabbing these images, this one didn't load properly. I had to make a screenshot, so it's even lower resolution than it should be. More magazine pages on the floor. You can tell from the black sticky tape they would have once been stuck to the wall. Also, I did have to censor these photos cause YouTube will not like it. A random pile of items, including scissors, tape, and a brush of some sort. A rather large nail. This could simply have been part of the structure at one point, but after closer inspections of the surrounding area, it did seem to be an anomaly. This candle has been melted into place onto the wall. I imagine it would have been the main light source. The only remaining page still attached to the wall. This, unfortunately, is not the image I described in the original post. If you zoom in, the top of the page has a date from 1997, suggesting this stuff has been here for a long time. And here it is, folks, the Devil's Chair. There was so much dust in the area that I simply couldn't get a decent flash shot. Another attempt here, you can see a bundle of items to the left and a blanket of some sort to the right. We searched thoroughly, but rather worryingly, the blood-soaked condom was nowhere to be found. This was strange, given the other items had remained. This is a god-awful place to be. This is what you see if the chair was facing the other way around. You can see how the steps open up so you could stand up. And also, it would be easy for someone to hide in waiting in this area. The same image, just using torchlight to give you an idea of how dark this would have been, even with candles. A bit of proof, if you will, that this trip actually took place. Nobility Scouted 2012. Very glad to be leaving. The final shot I took from inside the structure, just before the exit ladder. And this was the very lovely view that greeted us as we popped our heads out. I thought I would include this as it did well to brighten our mood, and hopefully will do the same for you. Thank you all for listening and being patient whilst I found the time to make the return visit. Hope you enjoyed it. A quick side note from me, 242. This was actually posted 13 years ago, and it was just a really good story. I wanted to tell it. The user has deleted their Reddit account, so I don't know if Nobility Scooter was their user account back then or not. I actually had to use the Wayback Machine just to get these photos, and not all of them worked perfectly. Really, it was just the one and everything else would load up, but every once in a while a different photo would show up after I had copied it. Very bizarre. Either way, I hope you enjoyed this story, and I know it was a bit of a long one. All the links are going to be on my website, since YouTube really doesn't like explicit photos and I really don't want to link to them either. You will probably have to use the Wayback Machine if you want to look at them as well. Broken and bleeding, but incredibly still alive. I considered my survival a miracle, given I'd been sucked up and subsequently launched by an immensely powerful tornado. However, laying in triage afterwards, I began to notice portions of my skin turning black, as the putrid smell of rot filled my nostrils. And with that, our time together is coming to an end. I hoped this compilation of stories helped with whatever you're doing, whether studying, cleaning, cooking, or whatever you needed to help pass the time. And if you got this far, well, I am taking August off, so August is a whole compilation month, so I hope you enjoy them. If you enjoyed these stories, hit that like button and make sure it feels it. If you're new, please subscribe and turn that pretty little bell to all notifications. As always, I would absolutely love a comment. Tell me what you thought, what kind of stories you like in September. And if you're listening on the podcast and are able to, please leave me a review, and Spotify does let you leave comments as well. If you'd like to help this channel and podcast grow, please share it with anyone who might enjoy it. It helps quite a bit. And if you'd like to help in a more financial way, like these lovely people on screen right now, thank you to all my YouTube members and patrons. You can sign up for $1 a month and get early access and a few other bonuses. But if you'd like to do more of a one-time thing, I do have PayPal, Buy Me a Coffee, and Super Thanks. All the links are down below for easy access. But as always, guys, thank you for watching and listening. It always has and always will mean the world to me. Sleep tight and don't let 42 bite.